Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Effed Up Stories. I am your host, Will Pender.
And I am your co-host, Ryan Sharp.
And tonight we have a user-submitted story that is affectionately called The Desert Witch. Very, very fascinating story. This one comes from Joseph Wisnowski, and I hope I pronounced that right. Very interesting story, different. And I'm very happy to be sharing that with you all tonight. But before we get into that, if any of you guys out there have an effed up story of your own, we'd love to get that from you and put it on the website and then eventually into a podcast. Also, we are selling a very limited numbers of official effed up stories t-shirts. There's only 15 of them currently, and that's all that's ever going to be made with this specific artwork. So if you want to get in on that, check out the official website, go to the store, and just snatch it up before they're gone. And with that said, we're going to jump into Joseph's story here, The Desert Witch. So it starts with him saying that his wife and himself, they lived in Sedona, Arizona. That was about 3 or 4 years ago. And basically, this experience started when they had converted a 17-foot U-Haul moving van into a solar-powered RV, and basically said, to hell with the rat race. They just wanted to go about their way. They proceeded to camp and travel for the next few years down the coast from Washington State through California, and eventually, they ended up living in a desert near Red Rock National Park in Sedona, Arizona. So after a few weeks of living in the desert, they got bored and decided to get jobs locally to, supplement their cash flow and replenish their savings account. So Joseph took a job as an executive chef at a Club Med type rehab for Hollywood stars and the super rich, and his wife took a job at a coffee shop / cafe as a manager. And in Joseph's opinion, Sedona is like a melting pot for some of the craziest and oddest people that he's ever met. It tends to attract the gambit of personalities from all around the world, including, everything from the self-proclaimed messiahs, the plastic shamans, the real shamans, the witches, the psychics, the skinwalkers, demons, shadow people, aliens, retirees. It's kind of a funny thing to include. Nature lovers and desert rats.
Yeah, I liked how retirees was in there with demons and skinwalkers.
You got demons, you got monsters, dogs and cats living together, and retirees.
Yeah, lowers voice and tilts eyebrows down, and retirees.
Well, we all know they're fucked. But now I say that jokingly, of course. I wish I was retired. But anyway, and the desert rat, which is affectionately an affectionate title for a desert redneck. So anyway, and big melting pot of different personalities and types of people here. So during the time that they spent down there, and it was around 3 years in total, they had experienced and saw so many different things that were unexplainable to them. It was just baffling. And if he had been a different person, he might have thought that he was losing his mind. So most of the experiences were benign or seemingly pointless, weird sounds, shadow people, and experimental aircraft. Sedona is surrounded by 3 or 4 high-tech military bases. Joseph believes that, most of the UFOs seen there are actually military craft, but, that's his opinion. But that being said, they've seen like the blue beams come out of the mountains late at night and massive orbs that would float across the tops of the mountains and then vanish. So, lots of different activity there. And about a year after working their jobs, Joseph's wife started to get annoyed with a few of the locals and their typical coffee shop crap. Someone comes in, they buy a coffee, they stay the entire day trying to get free refills. Very annoying, right? And most of these folks, are kind-hearted. San Francisco hippies left over from the 1960 to 1970s. But, unfortunately, a few folks are dark or creepy. Like something about them just isn't right. One such person just happened to be this little tiny lady. He said that she couldn't be more than 4 feet tall, platinum hair mixed with gray highlights. She wore a blue woman's suit, the kind you'd see at a conservative church or something. She would come in every day around 8 a.m., ask for a glass of water, and sit in the same spot day after day. She would just mumble or chant. She would never touch the water she got, and she just set the water next to her at her table. And around 4 p.m. every day, she would get up, go outside, then proceed to accost the first person she saw for a ride to a random spot in town or out of town. She then would get rides to certain areas all around town till the evening every day and then disappear or go home. So now before, Joseph knew what she was, because obviously this is going to go somewhere, he was just one of the people who she had accosted for a ride a few times. She would tell him where she wanted to go, then, you take her out to the location, drop her off, and then she would ask to do meditation with you. She wouldn't get out of the car until you agreed to do this, which is it's a strange thing to ask a stranger. So Joseph said he would play along. He'd, just to get her out of the car. And she would start the same way every time, hello, I am one of the teachers of wisdom through the mystery school of the 7 pillars of wisdom. Please close your eyes. Now imagine a ball of golden light floating above the top of your head. Now imagine that golden ball of light going down into your body and filling your whole being. Now take 3 deep breaths and exhale. Thank you. That is a quote. It's basically what she would do every time. And then, after this had happened, she would ask you if you had seen the golden ball. And of course, Joseph would say yes, or else the whole thing would happen. It would just repeat ad nauseum. It was a looping thing. He had to go through this process to get her out of his car. So once he did this, she'd get out. She would catch another ride from the first person she saw, and she'd do the same thing to them. And she would do this from 4 p.m. until she went home or wherever it is that she would go. So after Joseph saw her do this a few times, he decided never to give her a ride, and he forbade his wife from giving her a ride also. And it was as if it wasn't about getting to the destination. It was just about having as many people do her meditation with her as she could get. That's what he assumed she was really after. And he never saw her eat or drink, anything in the middle of the desert. She wasn't drinking at all. At least he never saw her do it, which, you'd expect that you would have to do in a hot desert. And after a while, she just started becoming a problem and was starting to scare people at the cafe. This lady would follow a customer into the washroom or into a corner, and she would just say, hello, my name is so-and-so, and I would like to show you something. And then whoever was, she was speaking to, usually a young man, would scream or yell, what the fuck? And they would run out of the cafe. So Joseph's wife had no idea what she was doing or what she had said at the time. But this had been going on for a couple of weeks at random, and his wife even had employees quit and say, and they would not say a word why. They just would abruptly quit. And, Joseph's wife would ask her, this old lady to leave, and the lady would just go back to her favorite chair and sit there with a shifty grin, mumbling till about 4 p.m. So, Joseph's wife was really getting, she was really starting to get upset with this, and it was almost like it became a dark cloud that would fill the cafe every day. It was just this bad luck that seemed to plague the owners. Orders were being lost from suppliers, and her employees were getting deathly sick. Right? And that's harsh. Deathly sick. Something weird's going on here. And this caused Joseph's wife to have to work overtime, and she was just constantly stressed out. So eventually, she told Joseph all of the problems that she was having with this old lady, And she was just starting to get really upset. And Joseph told his wife that the next time she shows up, you tell her that she's not allowed in the cafe anymore, and if she refuses to leave, tell me, and I will leave my work. I will come to the cafe and physically remove her. So 8 a.m. the next day, Joseph gets the call from his wife. This lady's back. She refuses to leave, and Joseph's pissed. So he heads over, he goes to the cafe, and his wife and the employees start to tell him what's going on. And his wife asks the lady to leave, and the lady asks why, and the wife says, you never buy anything, and we have had customers complain about you. So the lady says, no one complains, and then my wife says, hey, you have to leave. And this is where it gets creepy. The lady looks directly at Joseph's wife, and as she does, her eyes shift. And she says, the wife told him that they shifted to cat eyes. The lady said in a nasty whisper, I practice the dark arts and I will kill you. Why do you think your employees keep getting sick? And then her eyes shift back and she politely smiles and goes and returns to her seat. So that is very creepy. Joseph grew up in a very religious family, but he left the church after, seeing the hypocrisy of the modern church. And, he went on to study paganism, magic, and other ancient religions. He also happens to speak an ancient type of Hebrew as well. But anyway, Joseph proceeded to walk up to her and ask her to come outside so he could speak to her. And she asks why. So Joseph raises his voice, you need to get up and come outside now or I will drag you out. Now, Joseph explains that as he's a decent-sized guy, he works out, he's covered in tattoos, he has a goatee, he's bald, he's a mean-looking guy, right? This old lady was unimpressed and started to pretend to be stupid. So he grabs her hand and walked her out. And when they got outside, she was asking what she did and what's going on, and he proceeded to tell her that the manager who asked her to leave was his wife, and suddenly her she changed and she attempted to tell him who she was. And he cut her off and said, I know who you are and what you are all about. And she says, oh, really? And then she raises her hand. And Joseph assumed that, this was for some kind of spell or sign or something. She was pretty angry at this point, and so was Joseph. And, he started yelling at her in Hebrew. And then he started to pray in Hebrew. And that's when she started telling him not to do that to her. So, he got louder. She says, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't you do that to me. Over and over. Don't do that to me. Don't do that to me. So Joseph got louder and suddenly her face goes blank. He turns around, goes back inside. And by this time, the whole cafe and restaurant is watching this this big tattooed guy yelling in an ancient tongue at this tiny white-haired elderly lady. And, he's trying to think about how crazy this must look to everybody. But then again, this is Sedona. And this is crazy is the norm here, right? So the old lady gets up, still saying, don't do that to me, and exits the building. They're outside, and he tells her she's never to come into the cafe or the restaurant again, and God help her. If he sees her in town, she smiles, whatever, don't let me see you, right? She smiles at him, and she says, God? Like a question. And then she says, or what? And suddenly, as if by download, Joseph remembers the black magic book he bought, some time ago. And he just read out, he had read this out of curiosity. And in the book, it talks about these wizard wars between Aleister Crowley and some other guy. And then it goes into the fact that if you can attain the true name of the witch or the wizard and say it, the said witch or wizard will die in 3 days. So this is this crazy thought he's having. So he tells her, God has told me your real name, and I will speak it forth if I see you again. And she stops and looks at him, and she says in a weird voice, and she says, oh, really? And he said, yes, really. And then she turns around and walks away. So this is when Joseph realizes that black witches are real. They're alive. They're all around the world. And they have real power, or borrowed power. However you'd like to look at it. But before this event, Joseph has never really dealt with anything like this. And after this, it was like the spirit world opened up to him. And anyway, he goes back into the cafe. Everyone's staring at him. And he announces, to the cafe, that lady practices black magic. Don't give her a ride anymore. And please don't speak with her. Suffice to say, he got the weirdest looks that you can imagine. He sat at the bar. He told his wife, if she comes back again, I will bury her in the desert. And he was really worked up. He was pretty mad about the whole thing. And then a couple of customers came up to him and proceeded to tell him about their experiences with this lady and what had happened when she followed them to the bathroom or the dark corner, or when they had given her a ride home, or if they had refused the meditation. And one man said, I was in the bathroom, she came in right after me, and I said, and she said to him, I want to show you something. Then her face would shift into a lizard face. And, Joseph got these similar stories from everybody that he spoke to there. Apparently, this old woman would shapeshift. And it doesn't end there. This is the beginning of the story from Joseph. So there's more to this. I'm going to try to get more from him. But essentially what it sounds like is not only is she into the black magic, but she's possibly reptilian, or it sounds like a shapeshifter. That's some pretty dark shit. Ryan, what's your opinion on this?
Well, first off, I just thought it was a greatly entertaining story. We get a lot of the same, similar stories a lot, and this was an interesting little divergence. You don't hear too many tales about witches in the desert, kind of the thing. And, immediately I was put in mind of, you might guess it, the Skinwalker. Right.
Well, he did mention it.
He mentioned all kinds of things in the desert in Sedona, but specifically,
shape-shifting and you're in the desert and you got skinwalkers. Yeah.
Exactly. And, again, with the little bit of information we got there a little while ago, that apparently if you identify the true, or if you come up with the true identity of a skinwalker, then they die.
Dude, that I skimmed right over that fact, but you're absolutely right. That is a very important detail with the skinwalker. Fuck.
Fuck
me.
Well, that's why there's two of us. So, that's something that you don't hear about very often. Really, the only tale that we have of dealing anything with, anything to do with a skinwalker is the story of Skinwalker Ranch, which, it has aliens and hybrid creatures and dimensional portals and poltergeists and all kinds of weird craft. But there's almost no mention of anything particularly like a skinwalker in the Skinwalker Ranch story, other than it's attached to this ancient legend.
Well, there is a couple stories. Now, the highway that used to go by the Sherman Ranch, there are people who would drive that, and they'd look out the side of their window and see, these skinwalkers running on the back, hind legs, almost like a fox, I guess, running on their hind legs and actually keeping up with the car and just staring in at them on the passenger or the driver's side window. But what was creepier about it was that they'd actually be fumbling with the door handle, trying to open the door.
Yeah, you're correct. But this is the first time that I've heard what you could consider a personal tale. We got the story directly from this guy. and he claims to have had this direct encounter with a being that kind of fits the bill for what we refer to as a skinwalker. Now, the reptilian aspect is also very interesting. That area of the United States, of course, there's all kinds of stories of deep underground military bases or natural tunnels or unnatural tunnels and caverns with reptilians or reptoid beings living in them. And, so we kind of, there's with this story in particular, it kind of throws in a bit of a crossover between, the modern reptilian shapeshifter myth or story and, this ancient skinwalker tale. Again, it's another example of the kind of crossover that we see in this field or in the field of paranormal and high strangeness. And then look at what she's trying to get people to do. She's trying to get people to do a very specific type of meditation, and that had me very curious. Right? She's isolating people away from the community by saying, I'm a little old lady, come give me a ride. It's almost like one of, like a quintessential kind of fantasy story, right?
Do you know what it reminds me of? Honestly, it actually reminds me of the Black-Eyed Children. She poses as this innocent, vulnerable old lady to get you alone, and then God knows what the agenda is, or what she's actually trying to achieve there,
or what she's actually achieving without people realizing it.
Exactly. And when I read this, right, and Joseph mentions a reptilian, because this is the way that she reveals herself. But let's not forget, a skinwalker, they can take the form of any animal. Just because she chooses to take the form of a reptilian doesn't mean that she's a reptilian.
Yes.
Right? Because, what you hear at Skinwalker Ranch is these, a lot of people see this fox that's really, really large, or a coyote or something like that. And that's the typical thing that they see. But, the skinwalker legend and the lore says that they can be any animal, right? In fact, that's part, that's the top ascension point of the dark magic that they're in. To turn into a skinwalker, they have to kill somebody that they know, is usually a family member. And that's the only way that they can reach the highest point in this, this occult practice. And when they do that, they gain the power to become, a shapeshift. They can shapeshift into an animal, but they only do it, like the only point of doing this is that it gives them this power, and they use it for evil. They use it to hurt people. And it's interesting that again, like, that's such a specific detail. If you say their name, right, that they'll die in 3 days, or at least become very sick. Because I remember reading the the skinwalker legends on this, and that's the way it was they had to be very careful that their victims did not know who they were. In fact, they kind of had this rule that if they looked into their eyes, they had to kill them, because I guess people believe that the eyes are the window to the soul. Or you could tell who a person is by looking to their eyes. Like, you can get that, so they wouldn't risk that, right?
I've even read that that's the one thing that they don't change sometimes.
Yeah,
where in this case, obviously,
her eyes.
This woman was able to change her eyes, but again, when you're dealing with these kinds of things, nailing down the specifics can be a little difficult.
Yeah, but like, again, fuck me, I didn't see it, but I was just reading over it. He says reptilian stuff, but you're right. That detail with saying the name and that he, it's interesting that Joseph read this in a book that, allegedly, I mean, he said it had to do with like Aleister Crowley and some other guy, and that's how, you could kill, I guess, a black witch, right? Because that's true. That's to the point of a skinwalker, and I wonder if there is. Well, that is what a skinwalker is someone who practices black magic, right? And it's someone who attained like a certain level, the top level in that whole practice. But I guess you could say that, black magic is not just one. Black magic is not just one thing. It could be many different kinds of magic that's just used for evil purposes, right? And
well, that's just it. Is magic, if it is one of these things that exists in at least in general, in the way that we understand it, in from all the stories and popular literature and whatnot, then it would make sense that it is as diverse as we are culturally, right? So that Native American magics may have been unique to Native Americans, where maybe some Eastern European magics are magical ceremonies or tasks or abilities were similar, but perhaps done in a different way, and achieve somewhat different outcomes. But in the end, if magic is this real thing, then I guess we can assume that there's all kinds of ways to get to the same place.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that's interesting is just how powerful names are, because we have that with the skinwalker. We have this obviously in magic. What about possession? I mean, what's the thing that the priest goes after in an exorcism? Right, it's the demon's name. You can only cast this thing out if you know its name. So maybe there's more to a person's name than we really give credit for.
Well, that is a very ubiquitous thing in all kinds of different magical traditions, and simply said that there's power in something's true name, and I mean. Some traditions say that, your true name isn't William Pender. That's the name that you were given, but, you have a true name outside of that. And that's something that it's almost like the spirit animal aspect, right? Where, you don't just know what your spirit animal is. You need to go on a bit of a journey to discover what that is. And, discovering what your true name is, again, in some traditions that I've read, is something that requires specific meditations and or rituals. But in the end, the results in a lot of these different magical traditions are the same, that, having the true name of a person or an entity for that matter, because again, like in the example you used, the true name of a demon is often used to cast it out. That as the phrase goes, there's power in a name.
Yeah, well, it kind of makes me think. When you think of the soul is supposed to be, our true self, our who we are. For example, when you die, right, and your soul goes back to wherever it goes. I mean, there's this belief that we live many lives, but once we're dead, a lot of people have said that all of this information comes back. It's almost like being in your body is like a filter, and when you're in your body, it filters out all the stuff that you used to know from past lives and stuff like that. The purpose being that you can only really learn in this life if you're oblivious to what you knew before, right? It's a whole new situation. You're supposed to learn, I don't know, whatever it is, whether it's to be humble, whether it's to know what love is. I really don't know. But if that is the way that it works, maybe it's where does the name? Who gives us our name? It's almost like I think of it as specific as our soul. You have one soul that has every experience, every nuance, everything that we've ever done, we've learned, we will do. But I guess it has a name. But who gives us that name, and what's the purpose of it? It almost sounds like it would be dangerous to know it, because if anybody else found out the name, who knows what they could do to you with it?
Yeah, well,
right?
And that's, in many different magical traditions, it is dangerous to know it, but it's also powerful to know it, because, using certain rituals require you to, in order for you to invoke your own power, you need to use your true name. And in your explanation of things here, then perhaps it is the way to tap into, your full soul's potential. That, while in the body, well affected by this reincarnation amnesia, reaching or grabbing hold of our full potential power is difficult, or maybe even impossible, unless you're aware of your true self, your higher self, your complete self, I guess would be a good way to put it. And that kind of awareness might allow you to tap into your full power, your full potential, and, put that forth in the world, put that into your spell or your ritual or whatever you're doing. So, I guess for the practitioners of magic, whether white or black or whatever, anybody practicing the arts, it may be hugely beneficial for you to get in contact with that your higher self and your true name, your true self. But again, like you said, if things can read your mind, then unless you got yourself protected and closed off, then you might be putting yourself in a dangerous spot.
Well, when it comes to names, it has me wondering, honestly, if there's something. Okay, yeah, we probably have this, this really, our true name, we'll say, our hidden name that we don't know in this lifetime. Well, some people might, but generally we don't. But I wonder if there's more to it than that, and that there's just power in words and in enunciation and things like that, because magic, that's a part of it. I mean, you know as well as I do about Nietzschean.
Yep.
And things that people can do with that. And, all magic spells involve specific words, specific things that you do and stuff like that. And it just got me thinking into the most simplest terms. Like, we all have a name, right? But do you think that when you're born, the name that you're given, do you think that if you were given a different name, that you might have a different does different names have an effect on, who you might be? Because I got to tell you, because of my job, I have to look through the paper and stuff a lot. And, Jesus, man, almost everybody who plays curling is named Skip. I'm not even joking. It's just like, if you're named Jeeves, like, are you going to be a butler? I mean, the chances are, if you're Jeeves, you're not going to be like a high roller somewhere or something like that. You're pretty much going to be a butler, yeah. Right? So where does that leave most people?
Well, I think that whatever name that you're given at birth, again, is just your human name that your ignorant human parents have given you. Now, if there is this whole thing about true names, and it is attached to the act of creation, the act of creating a soul, then it makes me think of a lot of the ancient creation stories from a number of different civilizations, where it's all the universe and all of creation was all made with sound. That's how everything started, was with sound. I believe, God spoke some words, and there's, all the other different religions with their creation myths, the same thing, that, it started with a musical instrument, or it started with a singing. The God sang the universe into existence. And I do think there is some truth to that.
I do too. In fact, something I would like to point out, as a musician, is that the melody, like the notes, you don't even need lyrics. You can feel just by different notes. Major and minor chords. The different notes that go together, the harmonies, like you can feel. That's what
they invoke different emotions.
They do, and that's just, that is literally just sound, and it's not even just like the key and the harmonies and the notes and stuff, but even texture, right? You're gonna get a very different sensation from a gentle piano than you are from a raging guitar full of distortion.
Even
right?
though it's the same note, yeah.
Same note, but it's a very different animal how it comes across. So can you think of anything? That's a really good point.
Well, my take on the true name then is not that your true name is necessarily given to you, but your true name is simply the intonation that basically describes your existence. That there's a certain a vibratory quality that is, it may literally be the blueprint for your being, and
I like that.
It exists in a specific intonation of certain notes, and said or intoned in certain ways. And
that's a very interesting thought.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, that's really cool. You know what it puts me in mind of? Actually, this whole topic, it reminds me of the Elder Scrolls Skyrim, right, where the dragons had their own tongue.
Yeah.
And with that, they were able to. I remember there were stories in there where, like, a dragon could literally shout, these different words or syllables or whatever, and it would literally hit people like they were being hit by a whip, like ripping them apart. It was just words. It was just the way that they pronounced it. The magic in the way that they pronounced and enunciated this.
Fusroda.
Right. Like, it's just... So there's something to that, right? Now, I guess to some degree, as humans, we're kind of limited by what we can do with our vocal cords that way, but
and we're limited by what we can hear.
Right, 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz.
And that is, it might sound like a lot, 20 to 20,000, but that's nothing.
Oh, we don't even hear, like, that's what the human can hear, but that's like a baby. As you get older,
you lose that.
You do,
from
and not
ends.
to, yeah, and not to mention, well, especially the high end, and especially today, where I think about this all the time. Not to really go off topic, but it's so common today to see people. It used to be iPods, now it's their iPhones or their phones or whatever, and they got these earbuds stuck in their ears, and it bypasses the whole protection idea of your ear. All the little curves and shit that makes your ear up, and you're bypassing that whole protection thing and sticking this thing right in your ear canal, right? And unfortunately, those things can go way louder, like what sounds like too loud in person, like, not with headphones, but like coming out of speakers. Well, you reach that spot so much faster in headphones. Like, what's safe in headphones doesn't sound very loud. So for people who are constantly, hammering their eardrums with that, I honestly wonder if there's going to be like a point, if it's not happening already, where there's a lot of people from that generation that are going to have bad hearing problems.
Well, that's why we created hearing aids. So, I mean, aside from just the name, there's the other aspect of this where, he's chasing her and, saying Hebrew prayers in Hebrew, right? Again, Hebrew is a very interesting language because it's extremely mathematical. All the letters in the Hebrew alphabet are connected to numbers, and they have other meanings as well. So I often wonder. I mean, I don't know Hebrew. I haven't studied it. I just know of it from other things that I've read and studied. I've often wondered if again if there aren't particular vibratory or vibrational qualities to certain prayers said in certain languages. Perhaps that's why the Catholics always use Latin.
I was just going to say that. Yeah. Yeah, and for Hebrew, wasn't that what was on the Dybbuk box?
Yeah. Well,
right?
the Dybbuk is by definition is a Jewish demon. So
it is. But remember when we had that guest on, Ari, and she had I guess her own form of a Dybbuk box. I actually had sent off because there was like writing on that as well, and I sent it off to Jason Haxton. Jason Haxton. I believe his opinion was that some of it was Jewish or Hebrew. Sorry. So I think there's a. I mean, do you think there's a reason why? I don't know. The powers that be, like, I mean, English seems to be the most, maybe that's just because of the place we're in the world. Never mind. My whole train of thought is gone. I don't know where I was going with that.
There's a lot to be said about the different languages. Of course, going biblical with it, there's the whole story of the Tower of Babel, where at one point, all men and women, but the race of man all spoke the same language. And we were all working together, and we were trying to build this tower to heaven, and God looked down. This is the Old Testament God, so he's the mean and ornery one. He looks down and he says, well, screw them working together so good, all peaceably, trying to reach heaven. I'm not having that. I'm going to crash their tower, and then I'm going to scatter them to the four winds. I'm going to confuse them so that they can't speak to one another anymore. And that's, that's the story of Babel, and that's where we get the term, you're babbling, you're talking nonsense, you're babbling, I can't understand you. That's where it comes from, right? And again, we together as a unified race, apparently at one point, with a single voice speaking. And I mean, we don't know what language that was being spoken. Perhaps everybody spoke Hebrew then, and then man was cast to the four winds and confused so that we couldn't communicate in that language. I'm sure those who consider themselves the chosen people. Not all Hebrews use that, or Israelites, or however you want to refer to them. But, there are some who really do believe that they are God's chosen people. I mean, it says it right there in the or in the Old Testament. And if that's the case, then, as the chosen people, one would imagine that this ancient language, because Hebrew, while it's not the first language by any stretch of the imagination, it's old. It is very, very old. And, anything from antiquity like that has maintained itself in such a high order. There's, the Hebrews were known as amazing record keepers. I think it's safe to assume that the Hebrew language has somewhat remained intact over the millennia, really. and I think that perhaps that lends some credence to the idea that there are power, or there is power in those Hebrew prayers, and not just the spoken word, but also in their written word as well. There seems to be almost a runic quality to the writing, that I think might be applicable when we're talking about, vibrations and, sounds and their relation to magic. And magic is just a word that we use to describe a power we don't understand. Right. And just because we don't understand it doesn't necessarily mean it's not real. It may not exist in quite the same ways that we think of when, you watch a Harry Potter movie or Lord of the Rings or something, it might not all be waving wands and saying, the magic words. There has to be specific intention behind it. And, again, I really do think that, I do think that at some point science is going to be able to hack the universe. That we're going to be able to create a technology that is able to manipulate the very fabric of reality. And that's, by definition, that's going to be hacking the universe. Well, maybe that technology was already developed thousands and thousands of years ago by using certain tones and certain sounds in a certain way.
Well, Ryan, there's a couple interesting things that I actually want to bring up here. One is cymatics. So anyone who hasn't seen that, you're on YouTube after you're done our video, because let's face it, we want you to watch the ads. After you're done with that, Google cymatics. It's amazing. They basically set this, they'll have water or something in it, like some kind of powder or something like that, and they'll set it on top of a speaker, and playing different tones will create like perfect mathematical patterns. I mean,
in order to get that, you need more than just. Usually, what it is, it's a very pure metal plate, and they attach like a crystal resonator to the plate, and they're able to very specifically control the exact tone that they're playing. Because the speaker thing, you'll see some videos with speakers like just cellophane wrapped over a speaker and some non-Newtonian fluid like cornstarch and water.
Oh yeah, and I'll start looking like little clay people.
Exactly, and that's that. While that is cymatics, it's cymatics done a little differently. But what William's talking about is the metal plate with a crystal resonator, and it creates very pure tones. And as they change the tones, you get these amazingly intricate geometrical patterns. Some are almost like Indian mandalas. Some are like fractal, mathematical fractal images.
They're absolutely amazing in their complexity, and it's manifested by sound. And I got to tell you a story that I heard that I don't know if it's true, okay, but I'm sure if you Google it, you'll find some stuff on it. So there was this guy, right, and he goes on eBay, and there was somebody selling. This is military equipment, okay. And it could play tones. I guess because let's face it, okay, you're listening to this podcast on headphones or speakers, and we say that humans can hear between 20 and 20,000 hertz. Well, chances are your headphones and your speakers can't even cover that range. Not even close. I mean, you could spend thousands of dollars on, studio monitors, and they only get down to, 50, 55 hertz or something like that. But what this guy bought was military, some kind of military device that could play. You could actually make it do tones that were way, like you could never hear it, right? I mean, they're tones you feel, right? And you could do a range of these things. You could like cycle through it almost like a radio frequency. You're looking for stations or whatever. Anyway, this guy takes it home. He shouldn't have been able to buy it, right? I mean, it's a military device. It should never have been available to people that didn't know how to use it. But anyway, he takes it, he's going through these frequencies, and he actually hits a frequency that was the same frequency that I guess his internal organs vibrated at, and it ruptured them, and he just like collapsed on his desk. His organs were destroyed, and he just bled out and died. And to give you a reference point would be to say, how on cartoons an opera singer sings really loud and then glass breaks. Well, that's not based on a myth or some kind of cartoon thing. If you hit the frequency of a device or an object, it will physically impact with it.
It's natural resonant frequency.
Exactly. So
the same reason why soldiers break step when they march across a bridge.
Exactly, because if they're all hitting the same thing, I think MythBusters did something. I can't remember.
They did a really extensive episode, actually, where they hooked up a series of devices that created a repetitive steady. Because what it comes down to is setting up standing waveforms inside of whatever object.
Right.
And those standing wave patterns can actually cause the object to break apart, like its molecular bonds. Like it's not going to completely disintegrate something or de-atomize it, but it literally weakens the atomic bonds that exist in something as strong as steel. So if you reach, and of course, your organs are made up of various connective tissues and different types of cells, and probably have 30,000 different, natural frequencies, natural resonant frequencies. But there may be certain, there's sound cannons that they use, and what they do is they set up a standing wave inside of your body, and it causes your organs to ondulate. And when your organs ondulate, you feel like, it's the most stomach sick you've ever been, and you'll probably vomit and shit yourself because your organs are literally sloshing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that is a mass crowd control method that is used.
It is, and a standing wave, for anybody who has, I guess, decent speakers, almost anybody in almost any room can create them, because bass travels along surfaces, and like walls and floors and stuff like that. That's why if you buy a subwoofer, a lot of the time, like especially if it's for your computer, they'll say, "Oh, stick the subwoofer down the corner of your room or whatever." Yeah, because like that's how it travels, right? Whereas higher frequencies are more direct. They're very direct, actually, the higher they go. So the bass frequencies, they typically build up in your corners of your room, and that's why if you're in a studio like I am, I actually have bass traps up in the corners of the room, because otherwise what happens is the bass piles up in the corners of the room, creates standing waves, and they come and actually cancel each other out. So I'll be sitting there, and while I'm trying to hear bass, I'm actually hearing a lack of bass because they're canceling each other out. On a wide scale, though, in bigger applications, it's actually like if you sat in someone's car, they got one of those crazy subwoofers. There's people that have thrown their back out from that. The kind of guys that, like, you're in your house and they're on the road and you can hear the bass vibrating your house.
Your teacups or in coffee cups and glasses and everything are rattling together. Like,
that can't be good for you at all, right? That has to be like doing damage on some level to you. And so, like, speaking of frequencies and stuff like that, that's what they believe HAARP does. Creating environmental disasters by, basically sending this stuff down, I guess by laser at points.
Well, HAARP is using microwaves to manipulate the magnetosphere. And, the whole play on harp is that, the different lines of flux that make up the magnetosphere are almost like the chords on a stringed instrument. And what they're doing with these microwave arrays, and harp stands for like something like high altitude, auroral, whatever. What they're doing is that they're manipulating in very small areas the magnetosphere. They're literally strumming on the lines of magnetic flux that make up our magnetosphere. And by making small changes in one spot, they can make large changes in the magnetosphere in other places. And it can act as a heater. They can actually heat up areas of the atmosphere using this kind of an effect.
So, yeah, I mean, now we're talking absolutely huge effects that we have with sound. So, honestly, I mean, this is kind of an interesting topic. I mean, we started off with, this desert witch, and then we look at the words that were important and how they could play out, in magic and other things. But I mean, when we get right down to it, I mean, sound could be the fundamental element of the creation of the universe. And by tapping into that, we can do almost anything. You can make people feel a certain way. You can cause natural disasters. You can kill someone. Sound.
Some people believe that they were used to build the pyramids.
Yeah, right. So I mean, sound is such a. I'll be honest with you. I'm kind of numb with a lot of things in real life. Right? Maybe I don't know the reason for it. I could guess at it all day, and the only way that I can kind of feel is music. I don't know what it is about it, but if I really have to feel, it's music that does that. And I wonder if we all have different tastes in music, right? Now personally, I could chalk it up and say, oh, I'm a 90s man, but it's not just 90s stuff. I like music that has dissonance in it. I like music that is kind of hard. It's heavy to a degree. It's more of a minor key. And I wonder if that is because that's what's closest to my soul, right? Like, that's who I am closest to. That's my character. Where someone who listens to more upbeat stuff and stuff like that, that's what they like. But I can't listen.
And what's the term that we use for that, right? The term we use is, well, that's just what resonates with me.
Exactly. And, personally, like the really upbeat poppy stuff, it goes through me like a knife. Like, I hate it. Like, I can't be around it. Like, if I'm in the car and, my wife turns on the radio or something, and that's generally the stuff that's on it, like, I have to turn it off. I can't listen to it. She gets pissed off at me. But honestly, I can't. Like, it to me, it's not just that I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable.
It's not just that I'm an intolerant old man.
It's not just that I'm an intolerant old man. It actually makes me uncomfortable. So the music I'm comfortable with, I guess you could say it's not necessarily negative. I guess it could be, but it's kind of chaotic to a degree. It's minor, so it's more of a depressive state. It's aggressive. I guess that's what resonates with me, right? That's me. I wonder if for anybody listening to this, what your thought is on that. Like, is there a madman out there who loves opera?
And obviously the tones that come natural to certain Hebrew prayers have the same effect on this desert witch.
Right. And when we talk about sound, I gotta say, I've always hated church music. Have you ever noticed that? Like, this TV media, maybe there's something to that. They associate metal and hard rock and all that stuff, and that's the devil's music, right? That's what the old people would say. But does anybody like church music? Not to offend anybody, but
not to offend anybody, but does anybody out there actually like shitty fucking church music?
Yeah, I mean, it's just
Well, I mean, again, that's partially cultural, because anything that wasn't literally a hymn for a long time was the devil's music. I believe Sebastian Bach was persecuted for a time because he didn't want to play the same old boring hymns that everybody played. He wanted to create his own masterpieces, and at the time it was greatly frowned upon. And the church and music, that's a whole other podcast, because then there's like, what's that, the 13th note or the devil's note.
The Devil's Note. Then you get into what was the track that guy dreamed? He was like a fiddle player.
The Devil's Trill.
The Devil's Trill, and one of the most complicated, amazing pieces, I guess, that's you could do on the violin. And he said that it was brought to him by the devil in a dream, and even what's there, he said, pale so far.
Oh, it's just a mockery. It's his best attempt at what he heard.
Right. So, I mean, I believe in God and stuff like that, but I do wonder if the music is the devil's, right? Because that all stories point to that. He's this amazing musician. He can play like nobody else. He owns the material world. What's the material world all about? Well, not just money, but the people who have money and fame. They're actors, they're musicians, they're artists, creativity and stuff like that. And then you look at the church, and I've had to go to church a couple times in the past year or so. Like my niece got baptized, and I was the godfather and stuff. And I've gone to a couple funerals, and when the church clergy, I guess, when they sing their hymns and stuff like that, I cringe at the melody and how they force the words into it, because it's so forced. Nothing rhymes. There's no rhythm. It's just awful. And I'm not saying that as an insult to religion, because honestly, I don't think music has a part in that. But I just, there's such a stark contrast, is what I'm trying to say, compared to modern music. I don't know.
Well, I think that sums up the Desert Witch pretty good. We've gone far afield from the original tale like we usually do, but I think there's been some very interesting conversation, and in particular, the breaking down of words of power and sound
in general.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I hope you guys dug it anyway, because, I mean, at the end of the day, I think that's the main component to take away from this, is the importance and the power of sound, right? I mean, that's what it seems to point to. So, if, feel free to throw your comments out into the below the video. And if you have your own effed up story, we'd love to get that from you. Get it on the website and into a podcast, which you can do by visiting the official site, which is effedupstories.com. That's EFFEDUPSTORIES.com. And while there, why not buy a t-shirt? Everybody's doing it. Peer pressure. Okay, cool. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that, and you'll tune in to the next one.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a great night.
With you. She wouldn't get out of the car until you agreed to do this, which is it's a strange thing to ask a stranger. So, Joseph said he would play along. He'd, just to get her out of the car. And she would start the same way every time, Hello, I am one of the teachers of wisdom through the mystery school of the 7 pillars of wisdom. Please close your eyes. Now imagine a ball of golden light floating above the top of your head. Now imagine that golden ball of light going down into your body and filling your whole being. Now take 3 deep breaths and exhale. Thank you. That is a quote. It's basically what she would do every time. And then, after this had happened, she would ask you if you had seen the golden ball. And of course, Joseph would say yes. or else the whole thing would happen. It would just repeat ad nauseum. It was a looping thing. He had to go through this process to get her out of his car. So once he did this, she'd get out. She would catch another ride from the first person she saw, and she'd do the same thing to them. And she would do this from 4 p.m. until she went home or wherever it is that she would go. So after Joseph saw her do this a few times, he decided never to give her a ride, and he forbade his wife from giving her a ride also. And it was as if it wasn't about getting to the destination. It was just about having as many people do her meditation with her as she could get. That's what he assumed she was really after. And he never saw her eat or drink, anything in the middle of the desert. She wasn't drinking at all. At least he never saw her do it, which, you'd expect that you would have to do in a hot desert. And after a while, she just started becoming a problem and was starting to scare people at the cafe. This lady would follow a customer into the washroom or into a corner, and she would just say, "Hello, my name is so-and-so, and I would like to show you something." And then whoever was, she was speaking to, usually a young man, would scream or yell, "What the fuck?" And they would run out of the UFOs seen there are actually military craft, but, that's his opinion. But that being said, they've seen like the blue beams come out of the mountains late at night and massive orbs that would float across the tops of the mountains and then vanish. So lots of different activity there. And about a year after working their jobs, Joseph's wife started to get annoyed with a few of the locals and their typical coffee shop crap. Someone comes in, they buy a coffee, they stay the entire day trying to get free refills. Very annoying, right? And most of these folks, are kind-hearted. San Francisco hippies left over from the 1960s to 1970s. But, unfortunately, a few folks are dark or creepy. Like something about them just isn't right. One such person just happened to be this little tiny lady. He said that she couldn't be more than 4 feet tall, platinum hair mixed with gray highlights. She wore a blue woman's suit, the kind you'd see at a conservative church or something. She would come in every day around 8 a.m., ask for a glass of water, and sit in the same spot day after day. She would just mumble or chant. She would never touch the water she got, and she just set the water next to her at her table. And around 4 p.m. every day, she would get up, go outside, then proceed to accost the first person she saw for a ride to a random spot in town or out of town. She then would get rides to certain areas all around town till the evening every day and then disappear or go home. So now before, Joseph knew what she was, because obviously this is going to go somewhere, he was just one of the people who she had accosted for a ride a few times. She would tell him where she wanted to go, then, you take her out to the location, drop her off, and then she would ask to do meditation at the cafe. So Joseph's wife had no idea what she was doing or what she had said at the time, but this had been going on for a couple of weeks at random, and his wife even had employees quit and say, and they would not say a word why, they just would abruptly quit. And, Joseph's wife would ask her, this old lady to leave, and the lady would just go back to her favorite chair and sit there with a shifty grin, mumbling till about 4 p.m. So, Joseph's wife was really getting, she was really starting to get upset with this, and it was almost like it became a dark cloud that would fill the cafe every day. It was just this bad luck that seemed to plague the owners. Orders were being lost from suppliers, and her employees were getting deathly sick. Right? And that's harsh. Deathly sick. Something weird's going on here. And this caused Joseph's wife to have to work overtime, and she was just constantly stressed out. So eventually, she told Joseph all of the problems that she was having with this old lady, and she was just starting to get really upset. And Joseph told his wife that the next time she shows up, you tell her that she's not allowed in the cafe anymore, and if she refuses to leave, tell me, and I will leave my work. I will come to the cafe and physically remove her. So 8 a.m. the next day, Joseph gets the call from his wife. This lady's back. She refuses to leave. And Joseph's pissed. So he heads over. He goes to the cafe, and his wife and the employees start to tell him what's going on. And his wife asks the lady to leave. And the lady asked why. And the wife says, you never buy anything, and we have had customers complain about you. So the lady says, no one complains. And then my wife says, hey, you have to leave. And this is where it gets creepy. The lady looks directly at Joseph's wife. And as she does, her eyes shift. And she says, the wife told him that they shifted to cat eyes. The lady said in a nasty whisper, hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Effed Up Stories. I am your host, Will Pender.
And I am your co-host, Ryan Sharp.
And tonight we have a user-submitted story that is affectionately called The Desert Witch. Very, very fascinating story. This one comes from Joseph Wisnowski, and I hope I pronounced that right. Very interesting story, different. And I'm very happy to be sharing that with you all tonight. But before we get into that, if any of you guys out there have an effed up story of your own, we'd love to get that from you and put it on the website and then eventually into a podcast. Also, we are selling very limited numbers of official effed up stories t-shirts. There's only 15 of them currently, and that's all that's ever going to be made with this specific artwork. So if you want to get in on that, check out the official website, go to the store, and just snatch it up before they're gone. And with that said, we're going to jump into Joseph's story here, The Desert Witch. So it starts with him saying that his wife and himself, they lived in Sedona, Arizona. That was about 3 or 4 years ago. And basically this experience started when they had converted a 17-foot U-Haul moving van into a solar-powered RV, and basically said, to hell with the rat race. They just wanted to go about their way. They proceeded to camp and travel for the next few years down the coast from Washington State through California, and eventually they ended up living in a desert near Red Rock National Park in Sedona, Arizona. So after a few weeks of living in the desert, they got bored and decided to get jobs locally to, supplement their cash flow and replenish their savings account. So Joseph took a job as an executive chef at a Club Med type rehab for Hollywood stars and the super rich, and his wife took a job at a coffee shop / cafe as a manager. And in Joseph's opinion, Sedona is like a melting pot for some of the craziest and oddest people that he's ever met. It tends to attract the gambit of personalities from all around the world, including, everything from the self-proclaimed messiahs, the plastic shamans, the real shamans, the witches, the psychics, the skinwalkers, demons, shadow people, aliens, retirees. This is kind of a funny thing to include. Nature lovers and desert rats.
Yeah, I liked how retirees was in there with demons and skinwalkers.
You got demons, you got monsters, dogs and cats living together, and retirees.
Yeah, lowers voice and tilts eyebrows down, and retirees.
Well, we all know they're fucked. But now I say that jokingly, of course. I wish I was retired. But anyway, and the desert rat, which is affectionately an affectionate title for a desert redneck. So anyway, and big melting pot of different personalities and types of people here. So during the time that they spent down there, and it was around 3 years in total, they had experienced and saw so many different things that were unexplainable to them. It was just baffling. And if he had been a different person, he might have thought that he was losing his mind. So most of the experiences were benign or seemingly pointless, weird sounds, shadow people, and experimental aircraft. Sedona is surrounded by 3 or 4 high-tech military bases. Joseph believes that most of